Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and today we're speaking with Father Nick de Groot. He's the director of the Janssen Spirituality Centre. Thanks for coming in, Nick.
It's a joy and a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Now, obviously you're a Catholic because you're a Catholic priest. Tell me a story. When did that happen? Were you born a Catholic?
I was born a Catholic. I was born in February 1943 in Holland, and both my mother and father were Catholic, although my mother became a Catholic when she was 19 and changed from the Dutch Reformed Church, which is kind of Calvinistic.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember my grandparents quite well, and they were Calvinists, Dutch Reformed, and we always had a good relationship, so it was good. It was good.
So it worked.
The fact that my mother became a Catholic later in life, 19, I think that made quite a difference, that she had studied it in a different kind of way than my father had.
Yeah.
So it was for me easier to talk to my mum about this and than with my father. My father just said, go to mass and you know. Yeah, it seemed to come out in a more strict way from my father than my mother.
Yes. Yeah, she was more prepared to talk about the nuances.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
And so you came to Australia when you were 10 years old.
I was 10 years old when, my father had decided to go to Australia after the Second World War, and he said 2 world wars is more than enough. And when he was still single, he had sailed with the Shell Company on diesel boats, bringing diesel oil and so on. And he had been to Australia before.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So therefore he made a choice to go to Australia with the family. But when the opportunity came after the war, there were already 8 children in the family. And when he approached the Australian government people, they said 8 is too many to go into a camp. And so my father had to come first. On his own to get a job and to get some money to pay for a house.
Right.
And he went in 52, and the family followed at the end of 53.
Right.
With 8 children.
With 8 children.
And then two more were born in Australia. So we had 5 boys and 5 girls.
Good heavens, that's a big family. And so you had settled in Brisbane,
Yes.
you? Yeah.
Yes.
And had just the like the Good Samaritan Sisters, the Marist Brothers was your education base?
Yes. I went straight to finish grade 5, grade 6, 7 and 8 in the primary school with the Good Samaritan Sisters. That's where I learned some English. To catch up with my classmates. Had some difficulties there, you know. Yeah. First you sit in your class, and at that time there were very few books or very few courses for English for children.
Absolutely.
So you just sat in class and took it from there. But I did okay, and then I went for high school to the Marist Brothers at Ashgrove.
And that, it was at the Marist Brothers that you started to get some idea of priesthood, was it? Or was...
No, I actually had an idea of wanting to be like a priest or a priest when I heard the story of Damien the leper.
Yes.
And that really inspired me. And I said, whoa, the goodness of the man, to reach out among the lepers and to live with them.
And to die with them.
And to die with them, yes. Well, I didn't think too much about the dying.
You leave that bit out.
Yes. But then I kept the idea of wanting to become a missionary priest when I came to Australia.
Okay.
When we went to Brisbane, there was a Dutch migrant priest who would be visiting and keeping the services for the Dutch people in Dutch language, and also a Dutch choir. And as a young boy who had been in the church choir before, was picked up also to sing in the Dutch choir. And that brought me into contact with the Divine Word missionaries.
Okay.
Because he was a Divine Word missionary. It was then, I think I was in sub-senior or senior, that one of the newly ordained Australian Divine Word missionaries came and visited our school and asked if any young men or boys would be interested in becoming a priest. And I said yes.
Yeah.
And so we talked, and he made it possible for me to start at Marburg after I finished senior.
So how old were you then? What was the?
I was almost 18.
18.
17 and 11 months. Yeah.
So it was a fairly early choice to go down this path. Yeah. So the Divine Word missionaries, how did it go from there? You finished up in a seminary, so you must have done all right.
The first part of the training for the Australian young men who joined was at a place called Marburg. It is just west of Brisbane. And that was the first 2 years of spirituality.
Right.
So there was a lot of silence. There was learning about the way of life of the missionary, and also introduction to prayer, introduction to the constitution of the society. And so after 2 years, a person, if everything goes well, you would take the first vows, and then the choice, or you would be asked to go to the next place of study, that was in the United States.
Well, the next place of study for us now is to study time. We'll need to go to a break. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Father Nick de Groot, SVD. He's from the Janssen Spirituality Centre. And you were describing, Nick, your entry. You were at Marburg. You were doing your first 2 years at Marburg. What happened after that?
When I was there, I was struggling with Latin because I had dropped Latin when I was doing senior in high school. But the priest over there said, do not worry, you can redo the exam when you're at Marburg in the novitiate, and which I did, and I pulled a B, I think, at the final exam.
Good.
But after the taking of the first vows, the next stage for the study was to go to the United States. We had our own Center for Philosophy and Theology, and that was basically in Chicago.
Yep.
And there were 4 of us young men from Australia to go with one of the Australian priests who was already ordained and brought us by boat to America. The new place in America, Chicago, really was very challenging because it was a big city, a new culture, and also being in the major seminary, there were different activities that we were invited to be part of. And that was the social concern about the Vietnamese War,
Yeah.
and the working with the American Negro.
Mm-hmm.
And we did have parishes on the south side of Chicago that were under the care of the Divine Word missionaries. There were 3 parishes, and one, St. Elizabeth's, was especially in the heart of the ghetto.
Yes.
And there was an older seminarian who had, also an Australian, who had visited and got involved with the working with the youth in the ghetto. They were not all Catholics, they were whatever denomination they came from. But just to have somebody take care and interest in them and in what they were doing, and they loved dancing and talking and movies, and so we provided a certain sense of presence.
Right.
We were allowed as students for the priesthood to get the key to the social room to have the dancing and the movies and so on. Personally, being involved with the youth, I took special courses to try to understand the youth. I went to evening classes to study the history of the Black American,
Yes.
and also the psychology of the youth
Right.
in Black America. So I really felt very comfortable to be with them, and I still have pictures that were taken with them.
You would have felt you were doing worthwhile work too.
Yes. And when, for example, Martin Luther King was killed, and there was violence in Chicago as in protest, the youth called me up at the seminary. He says, "Nick, don't come now. We will tell you when you can come, and we can have a service to remember Martin Luther King."
Right.
So 2 or 3 days later, they called up, and we had a service in that social room with the youth, and they asked me to conduct it. I was the only white skin.
That's very, and that sort of jumps forward. I'm just jumping forward for the moment into the Melanesian experience you had with the Melanesian Institute from the cultural perspective. So you've got a pretty deepening in culture by that experience in America. Yeah. So what was the principal lesson that came out of that for you? What was the biggest?
The principal lesson for me was that I seemed to make a difference. And as I was still trying my vocation and kind of make a decision, yes, is the life of a missionary and celibacy and all that it means worthwhile? Do I really want this? But when I was getting so involved, even during my study time with these youth, and I seemed to make a difference. There was also a call when the father of one of the youth died, and he said, "There's no one to say prayers for my father. Would you please come and conduct a funeral?" Again, that was my first sermon in a Baptist church or something.
Good heavens. Right. So,
but it was like I was being pulled into a ministry that became more and more meaningful to me and satisfactory.
Yeah, and that's, so it was 72 when you were back. You finished up then in PNG.
Yes.
And that had big cultural implications for you.
Yes.
So how did that start? What were the things that you did in PNG when you first arrived?
When I first arrived in Papua New Guinea, I was already appointed to teach at the major seminary. So these guys would have been between the ages of 20 and 30, 35. They were not the 17, 18-year-olds anymore.
No.
I knew my topic that I needed to teach, but I didn't know the culture.
No.
So I asked for a year in the bush to get more familiar with the village settings, both in the highlands and along the coast, and to learn the Melanesian pidgin, because that was the basic language of the hearts of the people.
There's a language which speaks to all of us, and that's time. So we'll take it back. We'll come back to pidgin in a minute. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. We're speaking with Father Nick de Groot, SVD. He's from the Janssen Spirituality Centre. Nick, you're in getting the cultural and linguistic layout in the PNG. You got that in the bush, and then what happened? What did you do then?
Immediately after that, I was in class teaching the young men who came from all different parts of Papua New Guinea. They all actually came from slightly different cultures. They had their own native languages, and yet pidgin, the Melanesian pidgin, was the language that brought them all together. The big difference was between the highlands people and the coastal people. The physique, what they ate, the sweet potato is more from the highlands, and coconut and taro is from the coast, and so on. So I became aware of their differences. But the fact that I had been for a year in the bush, that really helped me to be much closer to the students, to understand where they came from. It was after that I was asked to join the Melanesian Cultural Research Institute, in which we went more deeply into the cultural aspects of their belief systems of the people, the value system of the people, customs, and that institute was set up after the Vatican II, and as soon as the Catholics started with this institute, the three other denominations, the Anglicans, the Lutherans, and the Uniting Church, said, "Can we be part of it too?"
Right.
And we said, "All right," on the condition that each of the churches would provide a qualified staff member to be part of the team. But that opened me up then to familiarity with each of the other churches.
Yes.
When we had courses of introduction to the Melanesian cultures, we invited the people who came new to the country from the different churches, and also other people who wanted to come. And we would run courses that would be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks sometimes, of introduction to the Melanesian culture.
Right.
And not only that these courses were given by myself as a white person, but we also had Melanesian men and women who also shared their story and would confirm what we were saying.
Here, it's this sharing of story is what's sort of coming out of your experiences. I can see it with the African Americans. It was the sharing of story and the understanding of their essence, the same from this Melanesian perspective. At some other time, you probably got views about way things are done in Australia with the Aborigines here. We might have a conversation about that some other time. So, what would be the... You then move from that and you move into what eventually emerges as the Janssen Centre.
Yes.
How do you find the Janssen Centre? What's the key of that for you? What's it for, the Janssen Centre?
The Janssen Centre is a centre set up with the support, if you like, or the Archdiocese of Melbourne.
Mm.
When they began to talk about the interfaith study, then the Divine Word Missionary says interfaith, intercultural is something that we can contribute to.
Mm.
So when I was asked to come down and I saw that what the mission statement was and the vision statement of the centre, I said, that is a beautiful statement of interfaith, intercultural dialogue and respect the different faiths.
So sort of fitted you, didn't it? Yes.
It fitted me, even though I had not come with a big study of different religions. My experience of working with the people in Chicago, the different countries that I had been to myself, and then my many years of altogether about 30 years in Papua New Guinea, it was a tremendous kind of preparation for the work that I was asked to do in Janssen Centre.
Absolutely. I've got, this is from the website, but I've got the leading sentence here is, the Janssen Spirituality Centre is dedicated to promoting spirituality, interreligious and cross-cultural relations, which summarises what you were saying there before and just fits your experience base so much. What would be the key point that would come out of, say, the Melanesian Institute that you carry with you into the future, just all of those people together, just one?
I think what for me is so important is being a Catholic and coming from a Catholicism that was kind of fixed and closed from before Vatican II into a theology and into a Catholicism which opens and is humble enough to learn and to listen to people from other ways of life, other faiths and other cultures, and to see beauty and truth in all of those, because I really believe that.
Yeah, and that's a framework which, and I was reading the other day about somebody suggesting that spiritual religion will become more mystical. It will become more embracing of that than the old formal religion. But just on that, we are out of time, Father Nick. Could we come back next week and talk about the Janssen Spirituality Centre in detail? Would that work?
I think so.
Thank you very much.
Good. You've
been watching Harmony and Diversity. We'll be back next week with Father Nick. Thanks for watching, and bye for now. Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allahu